75% of families don't even have dinner together on a daily basis. Like, it's insanity. And that is where the values and everything gets built into that child, so that regardless of what they're being taught in the outside world, it's always there in their subconscious. The younger generation, I find, is more health conscious to an extent. They're aware, right? They want to be more, but when I say health conscious, more fit on the physical front. So it's not necessarily the pure definition of being healthy.
My mentality growing up was, if I didn't like the way my parents did something, instead of me cutting them off, my thought process is, when I have kids, I'm just going to do it this way because I don't like the way this was handled. And guess what? That's exactly what I've done.
They're
I've
thinking,
not done the
I
same
want
thing.
I help people really come back to themselves in terms of, okay, what is my purpose beyond my role? And not just role in work, but home, mom, wife, all of these things. If you're, don't have bodily autonomy to know how to take care of your body, to actually be healthy and all of this stuff, you're not actually independent.
Kids are not building relationships in the real world. They're building them in digital environments, and it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or otherwise. Predators are taking advantage of that.
Women are proven to not speak out against things that they think that they should, or voice their opinion in case it might be judged, or it's not the right decision, or it's not a good opinion or a good idea, or whatever it is. So they're less confident, and because of that lack of confidence, they don't excel in the executive roles the way that they could. A fear of making mistakes. We're taught from such a young age that mistakes are bad, when mistakes are absolutely necessary, and we learn that now more than ever. But in school, it's taught that it's bad. It's taught that I was told a good job. I was all of this external validation and gratification versus learning any of that internally.
We're not going to punish ourselves and not go to nice restaurants or do nice things because we're concerned whether or not our kids are going to be able to behave in that environment. They're never going to learn how to behave in that environment.
If we're in a disagreement, if something triggers me, if it upsets me, that means that we're not in alignment and I need to distance myself, versus conflict is healthy. There's a way that you have to be able to build emotional intelligence with these relationships. And how do you break through that?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. But we're also trying to change the industry and the perception that it has and some of the problems that it faces. And one of those things, as you know from listening to this podcast, is equality, and certainly how females are treated and worked with in our industry. And our guest today is actually somebody that I did not source myself. It came from a podcast booking service. But I look at those when they come in, because I usually find that about 2 or 3 out of them out of every 10 have something relevant that I think the audience needs to hear. And so that's why we have our guest today, Tania the Herbalist. I asked her how she wanted to be introduced, and she said, well, here's my last name, but that's my brand. We're going to introduce the brand. That's the whole point of having a brand, right? If you're out there and you've built a personal brand as a producer, or you have a brand as an agency and people know you for that, don't abandon that. You can be the person inside that brand, but it's tough to be the brand inside the person. So with that being said, we want to introduce you to Tania and welcome you to Power Producers. Before we get ramped up, how about you give everybody a little bit of a background about who you are and what you do, and maybe even include the fact that at one point in your career, you were in the insurance industry, which I had no clue of before we started talking.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks for the intro. So, yeah, I mean, I help people really I like to become the CEO of their life, in a sense, because not just about building a business, but it's like in your health and your mind and your relationships and all of the stuff. And I realized that there was a big gap because, like you said, I was in the insurance industry for my entire really corporate career up until I left and became a full-time entrepreneur. And there is a lack of purpose and taking care of your mental health and all that stuff, especially when you've got quotas and targets and all those things that you typically have to hit. And so through that journey of reaching the peak, like I was probably the top 1% sales, like I was flown everywhere from Barcelona to Vienna, everything. But at the same time, I reached a burnout point from that. And that's kind of where I evolved into recognizing that there's a bigger purpose outside of that role for me.
So talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
So right now I help people really come back to themselves in terms of, okay, what is my purpose beyond my role? And not just role in work, but home, mom, wife, all of these things. And I truly believe that you can essentially be happy in all aspects of life. What I typically see is like in order to be really successful in life or business, I have to compromise my health, I have to compromise relationships, my time with my kids, or I want to be at home with my kids, but I have to compromise my purpose and everything else that I want to work on for myself. So I'm kind of coming in and disrupting the game in a sense is like, no, no, you can have it all. I'm living proof of it. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm an entrepreneur. I was doing it all while I was running in the corporate world. I take care of my health and all the stuff. And there's a way that you can essentially align yourself with each one of those. And I want to show people how to do that.
I think for that, it comes down to priority, right? It's like, the people who say they don't have time to go to the gym or, time to do this or whatever. It's just, well, it's not that you don't have the time. Everybody has the time. It's just what's your priority. So are you sitting down and evaluating that with people? Is that like a starting point for you trying to figure out
100%.
priorities?
So it's funny that you say that because the first thing we do is like a time and an energy audit, right? Because so many people are stuck in a scarcity mindset. And usually when they hear scarcity, they assume it's a money mindset, but more so with time and energy. And you're right. Like if people just committed even 18 minutes a day towards their health or their purpose or something like that, they can propel and be so much healthier and happier. So it's powerful in that sense. That's right. So that's the first thing that they do is like, what are you doing every day? What are you actually, where are you spending your time? Because they're like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm the kids and I'm cooking and I'm working and doing all that. But somehow, when they get their weekly stats on how much time they spent on social media, it's like hours and hours a week. So really, you do have the time. It's just what's the priority.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this, because I'm sure you're working with people of all different uh, ages and demographics. I'm 52 by point of reference, and I feel like the younger generation actually probably has a better grip on this than what the people who are my age or even older have. And I don't know what I would attribute that to, but I'm interested in your thoughts as you're working with people. Do you see that that's typically the case? Because I feel like work-life balance is something that my generation talks about but rarely achieves or doesn't put effort into achieving. But when you look at some of these younger people that are in their early 20s, they're seeing things that I haven't even seen at 52 years old because they have the freedom or have created the freedom to be able to travel the world and work from anywhere because of remote work and what technology is allowed or whatever else. In my mind, sort of the old school way of thought is, well, that's because they've made this a priority, so that it's happened, and my generation has not made that a priority, so it hasn't. But thoughts around that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question and observation. So there's multiple avenues that I can answer this. The first one is I mean it's the digital era, right? So the younger generation that's growing up in the digital era, they're moving a lot quicker than the older generation, only because they're like even my son when he like learned how to use his iPad, the way he's swiping and moving maneuvering through it is insane. But it's also beautiful because I do also talk a lot about business. It is the easiest time to go viral, to build an online business, to sell online, and to work remotely. It really is. However, just because of that, like the younger generation I find is more health conscious to an extent. They're aware, right? They want to be more, but when I say health conscious, more fit on the physical front. So it's not necessarily the pure definition of being healthy. So it's two things. One, I've noticed that the younger generation is accelerating through the online space and be able to grow in the business space and all of that and know a little bit more about like, being healthy. But they're compromising their relationships more. They're compromising the relationship with their parents. They're distancing themselves. They're trying to find them. I find that they're more lost in who they are, which is so incredibly detrimental to their health and their future and their purpose and everything. So it's like, at what cost?
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, seriously.
So, from the perspective, I mean, let's dive into it. One of the things that caught my attention about your bio was that you empower women in the workplace, right? I mean, I don't want to water that down, but I mean, generally speaking, that's what I got from it. So if that's not what you want people to get from it, then maybe it has something to do with wording, but I feel like that's the case. You've been in the insurance industry. I'm not going to ask you to necessarily recount your experience unless you choose to do so. I know this is going to be a loaded question and I don't intend it to be, but I mean, what are the contributing factors you see in industry today that put us in a position where women, and I'm going to be very careful how I word this, feel inferior or feel as they're being treated inferior? And I want to be very clear that I'm saying they feel that way, but that is not a backhanded way for me to say that they shouldn't. Okay. Because I feel like if you make a
Yeah.
statement like, why are women made to feel
God forbid,
inferior?
especially with the feminist movement. Yeah.
Correct. And it's like me saying, well, I don't really think it's a problem. Why do you feel that way? That's not the intent behind the question. I want to
Right.
understand what men specifically are doing in the workplace to make women feel that way, because I do feel that it's valid. And you can also look at organizational charts. You can look at levels of responsibility in companies. And in our industry specifically, you said that you were at an executive level, but that's rare. I mean, there are not a lot of female executives. I think there are more than what there were a decade ago. But if you look at the broad spectrum of the insurance industry and you specifically focus on what's going on in agencies and brokerages, typically you see men in leadership and in sales, and women are on the service side of the business.
Right.
That has been the way that it
So
always has been.
what's crazy, David, is you're not wrong. And I truly don't believe that it's because men are favored more than women. Statistically speaking, women are 30, if not more percent, less confident in speaking out about things compared to men and showing up. They're more afraid of rejection. They're more afraid of, being seen, about being judged, all of these things that, started since childhood, where that external validation started. And so men are more of a, like, I don't give a shit. I'm going to show up. I'm going to speak my mind, all of that stuff. And I think that's a big reason why, especially now, they move up. It's proven. It's that women are proven to not speak out against things that they think that they should, or voice their opinion in case it might be judged, or it's not the right decision, or it's not a good opinion or a good idea, or whatever it is. So they're less confident. And because of that lack of confidence, they don't excel in the executive roles the way that they could, even though statistically speaking, some of them are actually more suitable and better prepared and better for that role than a man would be.
No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, some of the best producers that I have ever worked with are females. And I attribute part of the reason why to being that they are more apt to listen and understand first than what men are. Men are just going to go in and bulldoze everything. And I do feel like females, by and large, are more patient, more open to hearing the story and the why behind, and then being more methodical. Yeah, organized, more
organization, multitasking skills, like
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I mean,
Sure.
I look at my wife, and she's the exact opposite of what you described of the average, right? But she's also in a leadership position in her organization with a large amount of responsibility. But she, as you were saying that, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, if I use these characteristics, I'm more likely married to a man than a lady at this point, because she's direct. She's not going to take, she's just going to get done what she needs to get done. But at the same time, between the two of us, although we're both highly driven type A personalities, the difference in our skill set, parts ways when it gets into the point that she does look at things from a different lens that I can't really explain. And it may just be the difference in two different personalities, not necessarily gender-based, but she's more patient with the kids. She's more patient with people who cause other issues, whereas I'm immediately going to go from 0 to 1,000 and lose my mind. She's going to sit back and not get to that point as quickly. But I mean, you mentioned something, and I think this is really important, and I'm asking this as much as the father of a now almost 12-year-old little girl. I have 3 boys, and my little girl is my youngest. And I look at this, and you mentioned, I'm not going to say you glazed over it, but you just kind of had it in your statement about the external validation piece. And I think that that's something that, is society has brought that to us historically. I think that digital, with social media in the digital era that we're in now, has only magnified that.
100%. I talk about that a lot on my social content too. For 2 things. One is, I like how you talked about your wife and yourself, is because it's our human nature. This is why man does not equal woman, right? Like it's a yin to the yang kind of thing. And I'm the same, like I'm that alpha personality, all of this stuff. And I'm very confident, which is why I'm a no BS person. And I had to get that way. I went through a lot of bullying. I went a lot of through things in my life that kind of made me be like, yeah, I don't want to be that way kind of anymore. And so, but I'm the nurturer. So it's like, I am more patient with the kids. It's a woman's instinct. It's natural, right? The man protects and provides. So you're quicker to respond to things that could feel almost as if it's a, danger to yourself or your family. And I think that that's a healthy dynamic. And whereas like for the women, I feel like what's a little bit harder sometimes is we're in a phase of we're entering the workforce more than ever. We want to be our own boss, be the leaders, all of that stuff, because we want that kind of respect. But a lot of people are lacking that. And I'm not talking from like this, the feminist movement where I think it's like equal rights, all that stuff. I'm all for working in your business, but to create more time with your family to do whatever you want, right? Without exchanging time for money. But when it comes to the programming that has happened to us, especially when you think about the schooling system and now with the social media influence, is from a young age, we were never taught, and men care less about this than women, but we were never taught how to self-soothe, find our self-worth, self-confidence, all of that stuff. It was always external. For when you think about schools, it was, the stars, a fear of making mistakes. We're taught from such a young age that mistakes are bad when mistakes are absolutely necessary. And we learn that now more than ever. But in school, it's taught that it's bad. It's taught that I was told a good job. I was all of this external validation and gratification versus learning any of that internally. And so as you grow up, and especially now with the social media world that's telling you, hey, this is what you got to look like, this is how you have to be like, this is how you have to perform in order to be seen or accepted into society, women have to try even harder to push through that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting, right? So I brought this up. The podcast is probably not going to be published for 4 to 6 weeks, just based on where our schedule is. So I want to remind everybody, because hopefully this is blown, is gone by then. But right now, if you were to go online and you were to scroll through, it doesn't even matter, honestly. I don't think what the platform is. I think the number one thing, piece of content that's out there that anybody can say, I've logged into my social profiles and I've seen this, is the jackass that got caught cheating on his wife at the Coldplay concert.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so
this is why I think this is a problem that I think that we have. And we had a guest on the podcast one time, Meg McKean, who is very much pro-female, and she absolutely should be, specifically in our industry. And we were talking about where the industry is, where it's gone, where it's headed, and all of this. And I asked her, I said, is someone who has basically grown up in this industry, who is really an advocate for females in the industry, where do you see the real issues lying? And she said, it's never going to be the glaring things that you would expect. She said, it's the carrier rep that comes into the office and meets with everybody and invites all the guys to the ball game that night, but never says anything to the female that's in the room. And she said, to them, it may not be a big deal. It may be a confirmation. It may be a bias in their mind that they just automatically think, oh, she's probably got to go home to her kids and her husband, and she wouldn't want to go to the game with us tonight or whatever else. She said, but those are the things. It's those little things that happen every single day that turn into something bigger. And I actually thought about Meg when I started seeing this stuff surface, because in my mind, what you see is everybody laughing it off, creating memes. I'm seeing insurance agencies create, memes that, on the surface, yeah, they're probably cute and funny or whatever else, and it's going to get them some brand awareness and all of that. But then in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is at the expense of a lady who has just gotten probably the worst news of her life, that is now probably getting as many hits on Google for people trying to figure out who the wife was as anything else. But every time one of these pops up, it's just another razor blade cut to this lady for something that happened, and people are completely immune to it because they want to be the next funny meme on social or whatever else. And I think that's where we miss. We look at things and we don't ever take the time. And I'm going to make another statement, and you know what? This is me talking. So if anybody wants to get pissed off, you can get pissed off at me. but it's selfish. It's what's in this for me. It's never taking the time to sit back and say, how is this going to affect somebody else? How is what I'm doing affecting the other person? Because we don't stop long enough to take another person's point of view into consideration. The reality is, if you're in sales and you're operating that way, you're not going to be able to achieve your ultimate potential in sales without being able to listen and take other people's perspective into consideration.
I think the biggest thing is as well, David, is we're in a generation now, and it started mostly in the early 70s where it's like this person-centered era. And that's why it's everything in relationships. Like that's why we're the cutoff culture. It's like there's no more, they're being taught the lack of compassion, all of that stuff. And it's been happening for years. I myself am 37 and I grew up in that era. And that's why you see the cutoff culture, you know, if they're too emotional, they're too this, they're too that. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing that. The other devil's advocate part of it is you don't do shit that you know that could be caught on camera like this nowadays and go viral tomorrow. And that's just the reality of it.
So that was the
right?
interesting part of it that I saw, like you say devil's advocate. I've heard people saying that it was done on purpose to create, I don't know what the hell astronomy is. No clue. No clue.
No idea too.
But I know now I know the name because I've seen it like 100 times. I've
Maybe
heard
a
people say that
publicity
this was
stunt?
done on, yeah.
For sure.
Which
I
would
wouldn't
be an
surprised.
insane move.
Yeah, who knows?
Insane.
Because I mean, we could find out that the guy filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. Nobody's
Right.
brought that up because they haven't found the court records yet, or he has them sealed or something.
But
And
also the reaction though, it's like, why, you know, if that were the case, why, you know, why would that have been the reaction from both of them, you know?
Well, and the other
but-
thing is why do you want to pump up the value of your company if you're getting ready to get divorced? You
Yeah.
know, I think that I would probably not want to have to give away any more money. It doesn't matter if I'm a male or a female. At that point, you're in a
Right.
negotiation, and this guy just weakened his position if that's the case, or he created an issue for himself that didn't need to exist. But I mean, I think, you know, I don't know. We could get into the psychology.
I also think that it's one big freaking distraction.
Mhm.
Because it's got everybody talking about and consuming themselves instead of
Yeah, what else is
prioritizing
going
their
on
energy
right
on
now?
things that
Yeah, what's going on? I mean, so listen.
anytime I see something that's going that viral and everyone's talking about it, and every time I log into my phone, I'm like, what's behind this? There's
Yeah, Trump's
always
true.
something behind it.
That's
and
true
Elon
because it's
Musk.
like, who gives a shit about? I don't know who either one of those people are. Who
Why
cares?
do you keep the algorithm is pushing it for a reason, and
Yeah.
whether it's something else that's related to that case or completely irrelevant that's happening today, tomorrow, that's what I would pay attention.
Yeah,
What is
that's a good
happening in
point.
the books right now that they're covering up? And this is also a big part of like what I talk about is like it's so easy to get distracted and then be into this low vibrational stuff that distracts you from your purpose and the things that actually feel good, right? But people love the gossip, people love other people's drama, and then they almost like forget and you know what they're working on and what their greater purpose is.
Well, think about it. Trump and Elon Musk, that dominated. There's no chance in hell that that whole thing wasn't orchestrated to
100%.
distract us from something else. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a conspiracy theorist and a doomsday prepper by any stretch, but I'm an intelligent person. And I think for myself, and when that wore out and people got sick of that, now we've moved into the whole revealing the Epstein files and all of the other stuff. There's other things going
We're
on.
still even on. I can't even believe that people actually still talk and waste their energy on that right now, as if some big file's gonna come out and all of the stuff,
Yeah.
and Trump's on the list or he's in. And I was like, oh God, you guys are still on this?
Yeah, but there's something they're hiding, right? And you know, if you look at it, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, when Trump and Elon were going back and forth, that was when he was trying to get the bill passed. So rather than focusing on like what was inside that bill and the entire country paying attention to how that might affect them, they're
Right.
focusing on these two
That's
rich
exactly.
guys.
Or even the alligator Alcatraz. You know how many people have no idea about what's happening there? And I was like, this is insanity. Like it's all a distraction. Why? Because when you're distracted and you're not just a distraction, they create it's perfectly orchestrated. It's not a broken system. It's a well-designed one where if I can distract people well enough and take them away from themselves, then I almost can keep controlling them. I can control how they're feeling, I can control how they're thinking, I control their happiness and all of the stuff. That's what happens.
100%. So you're Tania the Herbalist. Let's get into the herbalist thing. Like, where does that come from? What does it have to do with? I mean, I know that with some, and I'm going to make a joke here, and you may or may not think it's funny, but when I see Tania the Herbalist, like, I expected you to be hotboxing the room with a frickin' fatty, just, you know, listening to some Zeppelin or whatever while we were
Some
talking.
Pink
I mean,
Floyd.
but yeah, where did we get into that?
Yeah, It's funny that you say that. I'm probably the most like modern day professional classy kind of herbalist, but when that name was born, it just freaking blew up. So I kind of felt like it became a part of my identity. So funny enough, at the end of in my corporate job, I was at the peak of my corporate career where money was great. They were paying for my husband and I to travel the world, all of the stuff. And it was at the same time where I was the unhealthiest, and my mom was actually on her deathbed from too many pharmaceuticals. I
Mm.
mean, like narcotics. And I get my drive and my ambition from her. So to see that person in your life, like on their deathbed, was really hard. And so I actually went through a breaking point. I took a little bit of time off work and I said, I need to kind of figure myself out because I'm not in a good place. And it was like the first time where I had an aha moment and I was like, maybe there's something natural that I can do for her. And so I bought my very first book on medicinal herbs and I went pen to paper and just started writing everything I can about the nervous system. And I was kind of like blown away at first. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know herbalism. I didn't know herbalism, the term herbalism or herbalist. And my mom became my guinea pig and she got off of her narcotics. She started living again, laughing again. She's traveling right now.
Oh,
And I
great.
was like, oh my God, I need to share this with the freaking world.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, I think people consider it like probably the closest thing to herbalist is like Eastern medicine or whatever, or natural.
That is like Ayurvedic, traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Kyle, you were going to say something.
No, I said that's awesome.
Yeah,
Like
no, I mean, I
Thank
think it's
you.
great. It's amazing, and I'm with you. Again, we could get into this, right? And I have a feeling we would agree with the pharmaceutical industry creating the need and the medical community creating the need for you to become dependent on these things that are a recurring
Well,
revenue.
John D. Rockefeller, 1903, took over like, made it allopathic medicine. He took over the medical industry through his petroleum and then made it so that licensing were a thing, the education system, all of that took away herbal medicine, made it so that it was almost villainized. And that's it. Now it's only allopathic in the Western part of the world. And so, but I didn't know any of this until I was learning about herbalism. And I was like, how come we don't talk about it more? And then I went down that rabbit hole and I was like, oh, now I
Follow the
understand
money.
why.
Yeah.
You can't patent herbs. You can't patent what grows on in the earth, but you can patent what you make with the herbs, all of that. Like there's just so many plants that they actually use as the active ingredients for these pills, but now you've got $1 trillion industry. So
Yeah, it's crazy. So
Mhm.
so obviously that's your brand. How do you marry that to what you're doing to empower women in the professional world or in life in general?
to be honest with you, a lot of people know me as Tania Khazaal now because I'm trying to put my name out there a little bit more than just the herbalist. But I'm okay with that. Like if Tania the Herbalist is the brand, and a lot of people kind of ask me like, how did that come out? Because I'm still all about holistic living. Like I teach a lot about being faith led, not be, it's really not being dependent on a system in any way, shape, or form. Like if your finances are dependent on a corporation that can literally kick you out tomorrow, or a government introduce a mandate that requires a jab to keep your job, you're not actually independent. If you're don't have bodily autonomy to know how to take care of your body to actually be healthy and all of this stuff, you're not actually independent. If you are dependent on someone else for your emotional happiness and all of that stuff and don't know how to keep healthy emotional relationships with your family or your partner and all the stuff, you're not actually independent. And so it kind of all encompasses that where I'm like, we are part of a matrix system that wants people so dependent on some kind of a system versus saying like, no, fuck it, I'm doing my own thing.
I like it.
100%. We've been going about 30 minutes. What have we not talked about that you want to make sure we get out?
I mean, I think we've talked about so many random things, which is interesting.
Welcome to
Um,
my ADHD brain.
No, that's I work the same way. So honestly, like the one thing that I've probably I touch on is I've been spending so much time on it lately, so much more than usual, is because we've talked about like the broken system and all of that stuff, is as someone like myself who has done I've for the last 3 years, I have helped people in the health coaching industry build their business online, take their knowledge, do all the stuff in scale because I'm all about financial freedom. Um, but then after doing thousands of health consultations before that, when I was in the health industry, um, it's like I noticed that the biggest commonality between all of them was the sickness across everyone who's burnt out or unhappy, autoimmune, cancers, all of the stuff. Yes, obviously I can get into toxins and all the other things, but I noticed that like and I mentioned it before, as a cutoff culture, like this estrangement. And it's so crazy because I talk a lot about relationships and the relationships that you have, but estrangement is like a silent epidemic right now. And it's crazy. The kids cutting off their parents, or the parents had cut off their kids or cut off their parents. It's like running like crazy right now, where people are now just letting go of their families into this broken system.
And I mean, what do you think the contributing factors to that are?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. I have a whole workshop next week that's actually talking about the entire thing. And it all ties into the broken medical system. It's all perfectly designed.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, and
here's the
it
thing,
ties
like,
into new age, it ties into new age therapy, what I call like pop psychology. If you think about it, it started in the early 70s, which there's a gentleman by the name of Carl Rogers who introduced person-centered therapy. So it was no longer about going to a therapist and hey, what's wrong with me? Help me fix it. It turned into whatever you feel is the truth and is right. So that already started that culture of, and then you go into the school system, which starts to make it from way back then, which is why our generation is quicker to cut off their parents. If I look at my parents or their parents' generation, it didn't exist to not talk to your parents, regardless of how narcissistic, toxic, or traumatic it actually was. Whereas like now we've kind of been ingrained that love is disposable, especially when it comes to your parents or your siblings. And
or
that
your
started
marriage.
back then.
If you didn't get it right, then you can just get a divorce and get a do-over. I grew up in an environment in a household where divorce, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I'm divorced and remarried, and 15 years later, still married to my second wife. I attribute that as much to the fact I make a lot of mistakes and have to course correct in my life. But that wasn't a thing. And I can remember even when I was married to my first wife, it was like 2 years in to our marriage, and I was miserable, and I would assume I felt like she had to be miserable too. And I was talking to my dad, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, man. How did you get through it when, if you ever had conflict or whatever else, and maybe you never did, but I said, I don't see me doing this for the rest of my life. And he goes, you don't have a choice because our family doesn't get divorced. And I'm like,
That's the thing is, and divorce is a tricky subject, because I do believe because we are taught that cutoff culture, people are getting divorced so much quicker than actually just trying or communicating, and that's a big thing that I talk about. Like in my She's Empowered community,
I went
is
for
like,
another 11 years after that conversation, so it
but
wasn't a quick cutoff.
right, no, but I'm saying now more than ever.
No,
Like
I
I don't, when I
understand.
talk about love is disposable, I'm not even talking about marriage. I'm talking about parents with their kids and kids with their parents.
Sure.
Like, I think that I love the fact that people can actually walk away from toxic relationships. I found a note in my phone a few weeks ago when I was writing. I wrote it back in 2016 of how, when I was 14 years old, I wished my parents got divorced. My parents are still married till now.
Uh, I
I'm not
think
going to
there's
say
a
it's the
difference though
healthiest
between
relationship, but they're still there. They're making it work. But I was 14 telling them get a divorce because I don't want to see this. And why? Because I ended up in toxic relationships and abusive relationships for so many years because I thought it was the norm. But what's even worse than that is they're being ingrained to disconnect from their family and their loved ones. If we're in a disagreement, if something triggers me, if it upsets me, that means that we're not in alignment and I need to distance myself versus conflict is healthy. There's a way that you have to be able to build emotional intelligence with these relationships. And how do you break through that? You fast forward to the 90s when freaking Oprah and Dr. Phil came in that knew nothing about the family unit and started to push that mindset into people of like Dr. Phil normalized the broken family and like gave like a 2-minute TED talk on the worst parenting advice ever. And then you have Oprah, who's like still the single, no family woman that was all about women empowerment in all the wrong ways. And that's why you had our generation who put them on a pedestal, who normalized the cutoff culture. And now our kids are learning it 10 times worse.
Yeah, I think the
Mhm.
other thing too is, starting in I'm going to blame parents to some degree for this, if not 100%. Right here, like this is the number one culprit, whether it's a tablet, because parents are using this as a babysitting tool.
Yeah, yeah.
You take your kid to a
Right.
restaurant, they act out, they don't want to behave. Oh, give him his tablet, give her her phone, let her look at YouTube videos, do this, do that. Whereas we've raised our children in an environment where we're not going to punish ourselves and not go to nice restaurants or do nice things because we're concerned whether or not our kids are going to be able to behave in that environment. They're never going to
Right.
learn how to behave in that environment unless they're exposed to it and taught what is acceptable and what isn't. But I think it's too easy now to just hand them a video game or electronics and let that be what they invest their life in, as
Yeah.
opposed to, when I was a kid, I absolutely hated it. Number one, I think I was
I was
probably in,
outside all the time as a kid.
yeah, I was gonna say I was probably in ninth or 10th grade when the Nintendo came out and everybody started having a Nintendo in their house. Up until then, we all had Ataris, and we fought like cats and dogs over it. But my mom limited. We each got 30 minutes a day, and that was it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're outside, you're playing with other kids, you're running the neighborhood on your bike. You're all the things that you see in these like reminiscing memes that are out there about the good old days, and we're glad we didn't have electronics or whatever else. But you know what else we did? We learned how to get along with other people. We learned how to solve
Conflict
problems.
resolution.
And it
That's
wasn't
exactly
necessarily
it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily always the right way, right? I don't feel like bullying existed as bullying back then. They were disagreements. And the reality is, if and I say this from a point of view of a kid that moved around the country every 2 to 3 years due to my family relocating for my dad's job. So over the course of my childhood, I was starting over, making new friends in a place 800 miles away from where I finished school 3 months ago. So I had to constantly try and learn how to make new friends, how to get along with people. And quite frankly, as the new kid, I was typically the one that got picked on and everything else. Well,
That's
the
right.
reality is, back in those days, there weren't online forums or support groups, or there weren't ways to go and highlight this problem of bullying. You punch somebody in the face as hard
Yeah.
as you could.
That's the thing. If anything, in this generation, it probably would have victimized you to the point of you thinking that there's something wrong with you. And then
Right.
needing the therapy and doing all the stuff.
You
Like that's
gotta,
exactly what they do. It's normalizing that victim mentality versus like this is the tough love, lack of discipline, all of that stuff now, right?
dude, the
But
victim
even
mentality kills me these days. It's
right.
it's
But it
so
started in our generation. This is what I'm saying. If you're like 45 and younger, it started with you. When I'm
yeah.
talking about new age therapy and stuff like that, it started with us. We can
Mm.
sit here and blame the screens to our kids, but it's our generation that's more than ever cutting off their parents or stop talking to family because now we're the conscious generation and we're aware of the hurt that was done to us. And we're starting that generation, which is insanity.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
got to be
whereas
a balance. I mean,
and, and I will tell you guys from my perspective, because I am a little bit older than both of you. I don't know that it would be a whole generation, but I mean, if you're 37, I'm 15 years older than you. I turned 52 this year. My mentality growing up was, if I didn't like the way my parents did something, instead of me cutting them off, my thought process is, when I have kids, I'm just going to do it this way because I don't like the way
Exactly.
this was handled. And guess what? That's exactly what I've done.
They're
I've not
thinking,
done
oh,
the
I don't
same
want my
thing.
kids to see that. I don't want my kids exposed to that, all of the stuff. And you have parents who, I mean, I would consider my mom, based on today's like definition, a narcissist. But she did the best she can. She grew up with 16 siblings. Her dad died when she was 3. I'm sure she was neglected. I'm sure she went through a lot of BS herself. She did the best that she can. Now, I think the problem is there's no justifying the pain or whatever I went through. There's no, it didn't exist for me. But at some point, you have to say, okay, maybe they're never going to take accountability because their brain does not comprehend it because they're not filled with the same information and resources that we have now. But it's for us to say, okay, no, I want to have these tough conversations. People are scared of confrontational conversations, defending themselves, speaking up, all this stuff. So it's easier to cut off and avoid it, thinking it's just going to disappear, but it's just weakening the people.
Got to get in a few dust ups as a kid, man. Builds character, thick and skin.
Well,
You're
I mean, that's the whole thing.
I literally at the end of school, my son's in a private school, so I don't homeschool him, even though I'm all for it. He came home one day and he got in trouble. He's like, I missed my recess today. And I said, why? And he's like, well, I pushed a kid. And I said, he's 7, by the way. I said, well, why did you push him? And he's like, well, because he was hitting another kid. And I was like, so you pushed him because he was hurting another kid, so you defended the other kid? He's like, yeah. I'm like, good for you. Why did
Yeah,
you
that's
get in trouble
acceptable.
for that? I said, absolutely. I love that you're defending people that are getting bullied. I'm not okay with that. I took him out for ice cream over that. And I went and told his teacher, like, I'm teaching my son that it's okay to defend other people. If someone hits him, better believe he's hitting back.
Yeah. No, I'm good with that too.
Why? Because if
100%.
not, he comes home and they start building that insecurity of like, just tell the teacher, suppress my voice, suppress and that kind of that suppression of expression is what's leading to the problems in health and people not speaking out in their business and the sales and all of the different stuff is because they are learning at such a young age to suppress what they really want to say.
Agreed.
Fair
And
enough.
it's not, I mean, the teacher's not always going to be there.
100%.
You know, you can't always go to the teacher. You know, if I'm leaving the school bus and I've got to walk a quarter mile to get from where the bus picks me up to my home, and I've got kids pushing me or teasing me or taunting me, who do I turn to if don't have the balls to stand up for myself? And I mean, that's the thing. When I was a kid, you punched somebody in the face and you either got your rear end kicked or you kicked somebody's rear end. But the other thing is the next day or later that afternoon, you're all playing football or wiffle ball
That's
in the
exactly
cul-de-sac
it.
again or whatever else. Like that's
You're
just the
right.
way things got done. You sorted it out in the neighborhood and you didn't have to bring in all of these external forces. And I'm not saying, you know, that kids don't get bullied today. I don't say that at all. I am going to say kids are way softer because we make a ton of
Yeah, yeah.
excuses for them and we shouldn't.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And even the mental health correlation, because right now we're in an era where it's like your mental health matters. Like they didn't have you didn't have the same resources that we have now. Mental health is higher now than it ever was. So they cannot go and make the correlation that, because of the way we grew up, we had more issues. No, there's more now than ever.
I agree.
I think the one I was talking about this with my wife, I don't know, like a week or two ago. The one thing that I'll say is different is just like we talked about going and, being outside and playing and, how now kids are kind of not doing as much of that. I think times are just a little bit different. Like I used to ride my bike as a whatever, 6, 7-year-old kid, like all around my parents' neighborhood. I lived in a neighborhood that didn't have as much traffic, but I'm like, dude, my kids are never doing that around where I
My
like.
kid's outside all the time. He's outside right now. He's always biking.
I,
Someone ran over the back tire of his car and it's like broken. He's still trying to wobble through the neighborhood. I'm like, no, we got to get you a new bike. I'm all for that. You're going to go outside. You do what you can. I'm messaging the mom saying, hey, is he still playing at your house? Or I'm driving by or I'm biking myself to see if he's still out there playing. Like it's summer.
yeah,
You're not staying in here. An hour max a day, maybe on your tablet.
yeah, we limit that too. I just meant from like a Overwatch standpoint. I think that there's a lot of fucking sickos out there these days, more so, or at least it's more prevalent in front of our face that we see it.
That's
So
right.
that's the part that I struggle with.
Yeah, and
I just think
I
about
don't
stuff that
disagree. Yeah.
stuff that I was
We're in a
doing as a
sick
kid. I was
world.
like, dude, there's no, my kid ain't doing that. Like and it was just, again, there was no cell phone. So it was just like, okay, you go and you call once you get to their house and, you let them know when you're leaving and whatever. And so it's a little bit different from like, yeah,
But this
from,
is why raising those free thinkers, it starts with us, right? And I always say that because the exposure right now is heightened. They're getting exposure from everywhere. And if your kid's not watching YouTube videos, the kid that he's playing with is watching YouTube videos and now teaching it to your kid, like that's just the reality of it. But it's our job, and you said it, David, it's the parent's fault and the parent's job 100% to say, how am I going to raise my kid? What values am I going to instill in him and really drive home daily? 75% of families don't even have dinner together on a daily basis. Like it's insanity. And that is where the values and everything gets built into that child so that regardless of what they're being taught in the outside world, it's always there in their subconscious.
Well, the other thing too is parents are impatient in their parenting. They don't have the patience to take the time to explain
That's right.
things, right? And I think that a lot of times people think, well, I don't owe my kid an explanation. I told them to do this. That's why they should do it. But the reality is, if you want to have a replicatable behavior created, you have to give them the moral reason why behind you're telling them what they're going
That's
to do.
right.
And if you take the time to do that once, you should never have to do it again. But it's the million over and over again. I told you not to do that. Don't do that again. Why? Because I told you so. Blah, 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 blah. When the reality is, no, the reason I don't want you to touch the stove is because I just got done cooking. And if you were to put your hand there, it's going to burn. It's going to hurt you really bad. And I don't think you want to be hurt, do you? Probably not. So that's why you don't put your hand on the stove. Not necessarily just because I told you not to do it. So that's why
yeah.
you shouldn't do it.
They
That takes
overstimulate
effort,
you
right?
so that you don't have the patience. Yeah.
And the other
100%.
thing too, to your point, Kyle, the reason why it's different today is because you have communities like Roblox and some of these other things that are online. When we were kids, it's don't go near the shady
Yeah.
ice cream truck or the white van.
Yeah.
But now you've got these predators that are engineering the meetings with these kids online. And that's the scary part. Kids are not building relationships in the real world. They're building them in digital environments. And it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or otherwise.
Mhm.
Predators are taking advantage of that. But I've
That's
talked
right.
about this before. Even when you look at romantic relationships, the dating scene, kids growing up with Snapchat and everything else are building that emotional connection and bond with somebody in a digital environment, and you go from 0 to 1,000 in the physical end of that the first time they meet, because they've already met all of the emotional needs that they feel like they have from the online relationship, and now all they're doing is fulfilling what they view as their prophecy at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. We've been going on long enough. We could go all day at this point, I have a feeling. I might be David the Herbalist after this. I'm not sure, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. While this may not have had anything to do with the insurance industry specifically, it had a lot to do with life and how we operate. And that certainly can be translated for the people that are willing to actually make that translation. So how do they get a hold of you if they want to go to one of your workshops, if they want to visit your community, join it, whatever else? This is your shameless plug. Let them have it.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Tania the Herbalist across the board, from all social media handles, my website. That's where you could find me, Tania with an I, the Herbalist. And yeah, and I think that's nice about this conversation is it's really just talking about the transformation. It's not like all of us felt or thought this way, but once you just kind of lean into what you're being taught and follow that transformation, it's like your life just kind of unfolds the way it's meant to.
100%. Well, we appreciate you taking time with us today. Hope you have a great weekend. Get that bike tire fixed for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless. I appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Take care.